Welcome to the Investor Coaching Show, a podcast to help you get an insider's view of the financial world and escape common investment traps. We look at the financial news of the day and help you make sense of it so you can relax about money. And here's your host, Paul Winkler.
All right, this is the Investor Coaching Show, and I'm Paul Winkler. You are listening to a pre-recorded version of a workshop. We did this workshop on my website, paulwinkler.com. It is on the finances of going through a divorce, so we're going to continue with that right now. So let's say that you do determine that it is better to have two smaller residences, let's say, for example, or, you don't want to necessarily keep the house. You got the tax laws, capital gains taxes,
right.
And talk a little bit about that, because what are the rules regarding capital gains taxes, and when somebody is handling those capital gains as a single person after the divorce or married, talk a little bit about that, and what's the time period for that, as you can still get the tax benefit of married. You see where I'm coming from? Okay, so go ahead, handle that one.
Well, if you are filing filing jointly, that's $500,000 exemption for
the married couple.
For gain. So you bought a house for $200,000 and now it's worth
$1 million.
Well, I was going to say 600. You got a $400,000 gain. That's all exempt if it is under the marriage or married filing jointly, but it is not taxable if you're filing as single. Because now you're at $400,000, but the single exemption is only $250 in my example.
Right. Yeah. So if you decide to hold the house and sell it later after the divorce, and it's not, I think, what is it, a year?
I think
you have a year
is what I recall.
That you can sell it afterwards, or it can be within 6 years if it's written in the terms of the divorce.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that number.
Yes, but point being, you have then $250,000 because you're a single person.
Right.
So it really, there's a lot of serious tax ramifications.
Yeah, they can be. I mean, the capital gains tax rates, so for some people it's, 0, some of it's 15, some of it's 20. So, that can be a significant amount of money lost when you end up paying capital gains on that.
Right.
So we got an example here. We got June and Dan, and they have a cottage in New Hampshire, wherever. That's where you have cottages, isn't it? That's what I always talk about, right? Then they got a mortgage, $100,000 mortgage. The equity in the place is $500,000. So we got these assets, and let's say that the asset is under June's name, the cottage, that's $500,000. Then there's a 401k that June has, $50,000. But Dan has $550,000 of CDs. So on paper, they look like they're even.
Yeah, and you know what? What we're going to be talking about here is lots of times it looks fair, but when you drill down and you factor in the taxes and so on, it's not at all fair.
Right, and that's exactly what you see on this particular page right here. So we've got they sell the cottage for $600,000. Got basis, which is where you got into the place, $150,000. Now you got a capital gain of $450,000. But if you got the single thing going on and you're only getting that single exemption, $250,000, your gain is $200,000 in this situation. And there you go. There's your capital gains tax rate at 15%. If it happens to be there, is $30,000 of capital gains tax, which kind of hurts. Now, Tennessee is not a state that has a capital gains tax, but if you do happen to you're listening to this podcast or this particular workshop webinar from out of Tennessee, you might have a state capital gains tax, and just be aware of that. Now you're netting less money, and it became unequal. Now, I want to also point out something else here, and I'm going to tell a quick story regarding this, because I actually had this where I was an expert witness in a court trial one time regarding this very issue, where somebody had a 401k, and they were trying to say, I got this $100,000 401k, and she's wanting to basically say that I've got $100,000, so she gets to have the CD over there for $100,000, and I get to keep my $100,000 401k. And what happened is they brought me in to say, hey, wait a minute, the after-tax value of that 401k is less than the $100,000. And I made that point in that.
Yeah, another classic example of where taxes make a big difference.
Yes, it can make a very big difference. So we look at this and go, were the assets really equal? And the answer would be no after those tax consequences are considered, as you can see right here. And they could have gone a step further on the 401k, in my humble opinion, on this particular slide for that reason right there. Then you got Jane and Frank. And Jane, Frank, they've got stocks, $100,000. Now they're figuring out $15,000 in taxes, which means they got zero basis, which is a little bit. Obviously, I didn't come up with this slide. This is somebody else putting this slide together. But, and it's funny to us as financial planners, because if you have $100,000 in stocks and you have a $15,000 gain, that means that you had zero basis and you're paying taxes on $100,000 in gains. And that's why you'd end up with 85. But let's just play with it here. Here's another situation where you have a differential and the assets are not equal in this particular case. Right. Okay, so retirement, did you want to add anything to that, or are we good to move on? We're okay. So retirement accounts. Defined contribution plans. So you're like going, what on earth is that? You got to define benefit plans. That is your pension plan. That's what we're talking about there. So if you have a pension, you've got to define what's defined as the amount of money you're going to get every year. Talk about defined contribution plans, ladies. What are they? How do they work? What's the difference here?
Well, that'd be like 401ks and things like that.
Yeah, 403Bs, 457 plans, simple plans. Yeah.
They can also be split in the context of divorce. And again, as Paul said earlier, we want to factor in the tax on that, because if it's a pre-tax plan, it's not even capital gains.
So normally you can't transfer that from one person to the other. And what Ann's talking about there, you have quadros, where you can actually have something that is in one person's name, as you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Go to the other person's name without penalties.
And that 457 has also changed. It used to be before you cannot assign an alternate payee. Now you can.
So they came on board with that. That's a really good piece right there.
And the other thing, so you need to factor in, again, when you're looking side by side at assets and you say, I have $100,000 in a 401k or $100,000 sitting in the bank, the 401k is going to be worth what the 401k is after tax.
Minus taxes,
so again, it's not equal.
Yes, yeah.
And you can divide them per a court order in the context of a divorce. But if you need to cash out, and you're not 59 and a half when you can do that without a penalty, there's going to be a penalty unless you do it right away in the context of the divorce. Otherwise, you'll find that you are going to have to pay the penalty if you decide, 6 months later, I really did need money. It's you need to think of that up front.
Yeah, it needs a lot of planning.
Yes.
Okay, you may need. Do I need the money up front? That's why you need to really look at your whole financial picture, because you may need the money now, and then, or may say, "Oops." And then you paid 10% penalty.
And with it's important to bring your financial advisor in for all of these kinds of things, because I don't really think the attorneys always recognize the tax ramifications and the financial value of certain things.
That has been my experience as well, yes.
Yeah, and that's where, like a certified divorce financial analyst, these are the things we would look at and help the attorney and help you to think about, and maybe
and even a person, a regular financial planner without that designation. I mean, there are some things that you've been telling me that I would have brought you in. That's why I love having a team like this around me, because you have knowledge that, and we all are different areas of specialty, because it is complicated.
It is.
My take with divorce, I always say, you sort your feelings with family therapist. Okay, you sort financial issues with your financial person. You sort your legal issues with the lawyers.
Everybody has their place.
Because the lawyers are very expensive. So it's $250 to $400 an hour. Okay? Family therapist, $100 to $150. Certified divorce analyst, $175 to $200. So sort things out with those specialized professional before you don't sort your feelings with your attorney. That's very expensive.
Yeah, that can be really expensive.
And all of those parties are really part of your team. You should have a team.
Yeah, totally.
Your financial advisor should work with your divorce attorney and your accountant if need be, and your whatever.
For sure.
Now, you may be one of these people that's been listening and realizing, wow, investing, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye, and financial planning, tax laws constantly changing, and recognizing that maybe you might need some help in this area, but you don't want just anybody to help you out. So we have 10 offices in the Middle Tennessee area, and everything we do is fee only. We align our interests with your interests. So you can get an initial 15-minute phone call with any one of our offices just by going to paulwinkler.com/call. That's it. Every one of the offices is run by somebody with 20 plus years experience. They're all degreed planners. They all have academic backgrounds in investing, and you can get the help that you need. So if you want to set up a complimentary phone consultation, just go to paulwinkler.com/call. And we look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, this is the Investor Coaching Show, and I'm Paul Winkler. You are listening to a pre-recorded version of a workshop. We did this workshop on my website, paulwinkler.com. It is on the finances of going through a divorce, so we're going to continue with that right now. So if we look at retirement accounts, and let's just take a quick look at an example here. Now, this example I'll just modify slightly. So you got somebody receives $150,000 from an ex-husband's 401k. They need $80,000 right away. What happens here? They can pull $100,000 out. Now the 20% withholding, let me just talk about that. Is just an estimate that the government kind of has this number that's out there. You may end up owing more in taxes. You may end up owing less than taxes than 20% of the account value. You want to know what the tax ramifications of another $100,000 of income is from a qualified plan like this, and that is how you determine what the cash distribution from the plan needs to be, or what you end up netting will be determined by what those tax rates are. Right. But as the ladies have been talking about with quadros and those types of things, there are provisions in the tax law so as to not have to pay the extra 10% penalty on top of that taxation is what they've been referring to right there.
Right.
So retirement accounts, defined benefit plans. This is a whole different area. This is the one where you got the pension, you got a defined amount of money that will come to you every year in retirement. You know, a lot of these things, you don't see them as much anymore, but in reality, they're still out there where somebody says, hey, I work for this company for 30 years, and then they're going to pay me an income into retirement, maybe with a COLA, cost of living allowance, maybe without it. But talk a little bit about what happens with defined benefit plans in divorce situations.
Yeah, so these are basically pensions, right? And while they're not as common anymore, a lot of government employees still have them. There's certain big companies that still have them.
Military.
Military,
sure,
right?
Absolutely.
And this is one of the areas where I think the financial planner can be really, really helpful because it's a somewhat complicated thing to figure out what the value of that is.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, even an actuary dealing with a pension has a hard time figuring this out because they got to figure out how much money that they've got to put aside every single year, and then when you get to retirement, that has to be enough money to kick off the amount of income that was promised based on a formula that was set. Yeah, it's really complicated.
So you want to figure out the present value of what that future pension would be, and then hopefully 50% of that would be one spouse's or the other's. So that's a very important thing because you have to keep assuming that that person is going to keep earning,
working for that company and earning
and
earning that pension.
Going up and up and up.
Boy, that's a really good point, because you may be at the time of the divorce saying, "Yep, this is that's what they're promising as a pension," but they're only promising that if you continue to work for the whole period of time, all the way out into the future. And if you don't do that, then that's not the amount of money. That may be a pie in the sky type of thing. You don't necessarily have that. So that's a really, really good point right there. With Social Security. Social Security, this is a big deal. If you've been married 10 years, and I've had this situation happen.
Plus 1 day.
I literally had this happen in some cases that I've worked with, where somebody's been married for 9.5 years.
Yeah.
And then they're looking at getting into splitting up the marriage, and I'm going, well, this is imminent, it's happening, I'm going to do it. No question about it. I'm like, can you stick it out another 6 months? Because that 10-year rule has to have been. Then what happens, you're entitled to half of the spouse's benefit or 100% of your own benefit. Now, it didn't matter if they didn't hold it out for the 10 years if you were going to use your own benefit anyway.
Right.
But if there's the possibility that you might be using the spousal benefit, which is half, it may make sense to be there for the whole 10 years. But that's the 10-year rule. So let's say we take an example here. Social Security. Age 65, Mr. Smith's going to get $1,000 a month. Mrs. Smith's going to get, $500 a month. Miss Smith might not have any work history whatsoever.
Right.
Zero history, and still get that $500. And then, but if she does have work history and $700 worth of benefit, she can just go and draw her own, because it's higher than the $500. It's whichever is greater is the way that works. So, got to understand the financial reality, not only right now, but in the future.
Right, and that's the point, is the future part is so important, and I don't feel like the attorney, for example, is going to be the best person to speak to that. The financial advisor is. Yeah,
and you talk about that, and sometimes I feel like I live in a time machine. I tell people, I'll jokingly say, because I've had clients, I've had people I've worked with, kids of clients that are in their 20s, all the way to people in their 90s. And I kind of see what happens at each stage in somebody's life. So I feel like I'm in that time machine going, you're 40 now, but here's what you're going to be thinking when you're 60.
Right.
So often that happens. This has been the Investor Coaching Show. Thanks for tuning in. I am Paul Winkler. You've been listening to a workshop if you've been listening for the past hour, on divorce financial planning with Ann Sawasky and Arlene Brown and myself. They are both certified divorce financial analysts, and I hope you have found that helpful. And you want to see the visuals, you want to hear some things over again, by all means, go to our website, paulwinkler.com. paulwinkler.com. You will see the webinar right there on the website. Check that out. And thanks for tuning in to the Investor Coaching Show. Hey, this is Paul Winkler. Hope you enjoyed today's edition of the Investor Coaching Show. You want to learn more about what we do, go to our website, paulwinkler.com. You can watch some of the videos there, and if you're not already a client, you can set up a free initial consultation. Until next time, I'm Paul Winkler, reminding you that I believe that more educated investors are more confident investors, and confident investors are more successful investors. Have a great one. Advisory services offered through Paul Winkler, Inc., an SEC-registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced and information provided in this material are for general informational purposes only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what investments are appropriate for you, please consult with a financial advisor. Paul Winkler, Inc. does not provide tax or legal advice. Please consult your tax or legal advisor regarding your particular situation.